On today's 7th Circle Gaming, we analyze the open world survival crafting real-time strategy game, RimWorld. And we start off though, like we usually do, with a little bit of full disclosure. You're cordially invited to pause the video now and read through all this at your leisure, or if you prefer not to, well, just join us in the screenshots. And our first screenshot is just meant to be illustrative of what the gameplay window looks like in general. Although calling this a simplistic gameplay or simplistic game would be an understatement in the extreme. There's an awful lot for players to pay attention to. There's important user interface items all over the screen, not only in the center, but the top left corner, the middle center, the top right, the bottom right, and the bottom sort of menu bar. And with that, let's move on to our second screenshot, which is meant to illustrate, well, the second part of any sort of survival crafting game, which is the research menu, where players research and unlock new technologies that they're going to utilize to increase their odds of surviving through the game to possibly govern the entire planet or something like that. Our third screenshot that we have to share with you is just meant to be illustrative of the third part of any sort, of any survival crafting game, which is crafting. And one thing that we would want to draw your attention to in particular is that RimWorld utilizes some different wording for on its user interface. The use of the word bills as opposed to crafting queue or crafting is something that players might find unusual. And with that, let's move on to our first chapter proper, which is always is immersion. And here RimWorld has earned a 4 out of 15. The game's presentation is a top-down low fantasy game world with also very low resolution graphics, nothing 4K or anything like that required here. The game will run on a potato for the game will also be utilizing statistics focus to get players invested into the game world, mostly in the sense that players have a lot of statistics to manage about a variety of different characters. The game will be attempting to utilize challenge to get players immersed into the game world. Again, in the sense that players have to do a lot of managing of scarce resources and allocating the ideal character to that particular task. One final note here is that the game will be attempting to utilize player agency to get players invested into the game world, in that it allows players to design, in some cases, their home base area. It allows players to custom design characters or to select a planet that, or a game map rather, that most suits their interests. And with that, we do need to move right along to difficulty. And here, RimWorld has earned a 4.5 out of 15. The game provides some basic options for difficulty at first. The reasonably complete descriptions are most agreeable. A tutorial is available and is highly suggested that players complete the tutorial before starting their first colony. RimWorld can be used only with a mouse. However, some key commands do seem to be easier or quicker if the player utilizes the hotkeys as opposed to just clicking around. Once again, some of the user interface items might be unusually titled, or players might find them to be particularly difficult to navigate if they haven't completed the tutorial where they learn exactly how, or the logic of RimWorld. With that, we need to talk about the one sort of shining star, the shining beacon of RimWorld, and that is the lasting appeal. Here the game has earned a 6.5 out of 15. The game is very supportive of mods, and there is a mod for almost every major science fiction fantasy franchise. Name one and it's probably got one. The game also has a fair amount of downloadable content, which adds significantly to game content. The game could also be said to appeal to several different genres, not only the survival crafting genre, but also a real-time strategy genre, or emergent gameplay fans as well. RimWorld can embrace any kind of or any amount of time that the player has available to it. However, it does seem from our evaluation sessions that a short gameplay session is optimal. And as the gameplay sessions get longer and longer, players are less likely to be completely immersed into the game. The game does have multiple different combinations of starting archetypes and starting difficulty settings, which are going to increase the lasting appeal. Players can select almost any starting base area on their selected map, which will give them an additional amount of lasting appeal. So, long story short, RimWorld has a lot of lasting appeal to be added to it. And with that, though, let's sum up in the overall score. Overall, RimWorld has earned a 5 out of 15. The game does seem to be fairly simple to learn and difficult to master. The mods and the DLC are going to increase the playability if the player is interested in the basic gameplay loop. And RimWorld does its best, or seems to do its best, to straddle multiple genres of game to pull in the most players that it possibly can. There are multiple combinations of starting conditions to give players the level of challenge that they would prefer at that particular moment. Some of the user interface is not as obvious or as clear as players might want to have it, though the tutorial is going to be fairly assistive with understanding how the logic of the game world and the wording that RimWorld is going to be utilizing. One final subjective statement: RimWorld could be said to be played fairly mindlessly. There's also a possibility of humor to be found in the game, as in-game events may play out in ways that players don't expect. And with that, we won't keep you any longer. We'll just say congratulations. This is the end of the video. If you liked it, found it interesting or entertaining, fantastic. Now, if you've got a game that you'd really like to see analyzed on the channel, leave it in the comments section below. Do the other YouTube-y things. And from 7th Circle Gaming, goodbye.